Welcome to From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing the challenges and providing tips for women in tech leadership. Hi, I'm your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and in each episode, we'll hear from other successful women in tech, sharing their stories, insights, and advice. Join us as we empower each other to reach our full potential in the tech industry. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. And today we have a very, very important topic to talk about. We are going to talk about Tame, the Dragon of Self-Doubt. And I'm super excited to have Katherine Wintsch with me. And a little bit about Katherine. She's the founder and CEO of the Mom Complex. And she helps some of the largest companies in the world, such as Walmart, Johnson & Johnson, Pinterest, and Chobani, develop better products and services for mothers. She's also an author of the popular book, Slay Like a Mother. But don't let all the accomplishment fool you. She has been through years of, self-doubt herself. And she has tamed her own self-doubt and helping other women do the same. So hi, Katherine, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, Katherine. Let's start talk about self-doubt. So can you share a little bit how self-doubt was present in your life?
Absolutely. So I lived with what I refer to as this dragon of self-doubt from age 15 to 35. And it was just this relentless belief that I wasn't good enough and I wasn't doing enough and that I always needed to be more and do more, no matter what I achieved or what I accomplished. And so I got to the place where I had a lot of external trappings of success. I checked the boxes that society said that you're supposed to check, but I still felt very hollow and empty on the inside, because I was really living my life for other people and achieving their goals and their expectations. And I was just really lost and went through lots of therapy and self-help books and red wine, and I learned to heal myself. I learned to love myself from the inside so that I no longer require it from the outside, and it's a much better place to be.
Yeah, and there's nothing bad with red wine. I'm a wine lover myself. You mentioned several things that I wanted to touch on. First of all, about success and how others see success like and the need to succeed as others expect you to. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel it's very, very relevant to many other women.
Yeah. So for most of my life, I was a insecure overachiever, so didn't really feel good enough about myself on the inside. So I overachieved on the outside, in the form of getting straight A's in school or excelling in my career, my job very quickly. But what happened to me was that, if I became a vice president I was in marketing and advertising, and it was a really big deal to be a vice president. And so, I was running and gunning for that and working 80 hours a week. And then I got it, I achieved it. And then I was probably proud of myself for 8 days. And then on the ninth day, it was like, what's next? And, what's it going to take to be a senior vice president? How long is that going to take? And it was just this hamster wheel of like more, constantly chasing more money, more titles, more trophies, all external signs, of success. But, eventually once I collected enough of them, I was like, oh, this isn't working. Like this isn't filling up my soul. I feel quite empty and hollow, despite the fact that I checked the boxes. What our society defines as success. But I realized the hard way that that is not my definition of success.
How did you realize that? Because I know that many, many women that I work with feel similar feelings to yours, and the need to satisfy what others see as success. How do you identify this gap?
I noticed it in myself when I felt like I was almost living a double life, in the sense that when someone else from the outside world would like congratulate me on something about work, they would say, "Oh, I heard you got a promotion, or you won this account, or yeah, it's so neat." And, the outside of me, my expression was like, "Oh, yeah, yay." But the inside of me was like, "No, I'm dying in here." And so I think I started to notice that gap, or that disconnect between, like, I feel like I should be proud of myself. Other people are proud of me, but I feel quite hollow and empty and, not a whole person. I felt like, I was really just a performer, at work. And so anyway, I think if you start to notice that gap, or, when people ask you, how's your job? If you answer one way, it's great, but inside you're like, it's sucking the life out of me. That's a disconnect. That's a gap that, eventually needs to be closed.
Absolutely. And why do you think women face that? Because we are talking about women, and I know that many women face those things, those feelings.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely universal. I think for a lot of reasons, like the expectations and what society places on women, is so high. So it's really hard for us to feel like we're winning, because, if we work outside the home, it's selfish and we shouldn't do that. But if we stay at home, it's lazy and, we should do that. And if we have too many kids, it's bad. And if we don't have kids at all, it's really bad. And, and so there's really no way to win. But I think that's why we feel worse about ourselves than our, male counterparts do, and people are always saying, like, dads don't do enough or men don't do enough, but they're doing what society expects of them, which is not much, and so there are many that go above and beyond. My husband is one of them, but they're in the minority, and so I think at some point we also have to start addressing the narratives. And, this phrase that I hear from women and mothers all over the world is so constant. It's just, I am not enough. And for so long, we've just focused on the I, like, I suck, I'm terrible, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that, instead of questioning what actually is enough. Like, what does society say is enough, but what is our definition of enough? And, do you have to be a size 2? Like, do you have to be the executive vice president? Do you have, we have to start, learning and calling the shots for ourselves.
And how do you start doing that? Let's say you are a woman in tech and you feel this gap, you feel like completely disconnected to what society expects from you. How do you start addressing that?
I think it's, first of all, I mean, it sounds so simple, but just being aware that they are narratives or they are stories, just as an example, in my own life, for a long time, I felt like a bad mother because I didn't enjoy shopping for food or cooking dinner. It was really a drain for me. And I felt so much guilt. And I just had this image in my mind of like a mom with an apron and, all of that we just get so, ingrained in, from seeing and project ourselves onto. And then finally I said, wait a second, once my kids got a little bit older, I have 2 teenagers and a husband is very helpful. And I said, everybody's looking to me to be the one to buy and make, all the food, and give me one reason outside of history why that should be me. One reason. Because I happen to be the breadwinner in my household, which would suggest that if you took gender out of it, I'm the last person that should be buying and making the food, but it's always been attached to gender. And so I think it's starting to recognize and say, okay, I'm not going to subscribe to that, Or I'm not going to go for the senior vice president. I'm going to become a vice president and I'm going to be happy with that. And that's enough for me, so it's starting to define what is enough for you and who cares what everybody else says or thinks.
Yeah. And how do you even know that? Because so many women don't even know what they want. How do you start realizing what is it that you want in your life?
There's a great book I would recommend. It's called Finding Your Own North Star by Martha Beck. And she's a life coach. She's Oprah's life coach, like world renowned. And there's lots of exercises in the book, like you write in the book. It's, it's not a light beach read, but it really forces you to examine your life and what activities are you participating in that suck the life out of you, that drain your soul and your energy. And then what are the parts of your day or your week or your life that just light you up and fill you with joy? And so when I did that exercise, that's when I realized that my whole career was built around very big things, big teams, like big revenue, like a lot on the line, a lot of pressure. But the things that made me so happy were smaller things and impact and deep relationships with the client. So that just helped me as I evolve my career. I know that like big and flashy is impressive to other people, but it's very draining to me,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was able to make a lot of decisions about my entrepreneurial business, but also about my career, even before I became an entrepreneur, because I know who I am and I know what drains me and what, really excites me.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it took years to realize that too. I mean, I was in a career that was very rewarding financially, but was draining me over the years until I realized that there's more. There's more for me in this life than what I was doing. I think some of that is we just don't see the possibilities.
No, and I think it's really important for women who have gone through this transformation and know themselves and then find and build their career around themselves. I'm not saying you have to be an entrepreneur. That's not true at all. It's like, but building their career, their jobs, their lives around, who they are, who they truly are, who they are and how they want to spend their time, that's possible. And so I hope the more women that do this, the more they'll talk about it, because it is entirely possible to have a career that is exciting and, impactful and aligns with who you are and doesn't deplete you or drain you. And I think we just need more role models so that women can believe that it's worth fighting for or worth creating.
Absolutely. And where do you think women can find those role models? What places they can go to? I mean, virtual or physical places,
Yeah.
what can they do?
I'm always a fan of watching speeches like YouTube, it's TED Talks, of course, but other women, TED Talks are a great example, but that are just telling their story of how they did things differently. And that's one thing that really impacted me on my own journeys. I was actually at a conference and just heard a woman, she was an entrepreneur and she was speaking. And she said, she'd started her own company. And the thing that she was most proud of was that growth was not her goal. Like she knew a certain amount of revenue that they needed to make to pay the salaries. And it wasn't going to be like, okay, it's going to be 2 million and then 5 million and then 10 million and 50, that it was just growth wasn't the goal. It's build something that's sustainable and has, work-life balance built in and everything. And I'd never heard an entrepreneur utter those words before. I didn't even know that was a possibility. I always thought like grow, and then sell it. And then you get cancer and die, like that. I feel like that's the path that I'm so familiar with of seeing other people. But so I think, I like watching women who have done something cool and then hearing their take on it via a speech, I think is very empowering.
Yeah, and how did this transition? I mean, it's not easy. Kind of, can you share kind of how did you even approach it and believe that it's possible for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when you ask it that way, it makes it seem like it was a big, like courageous leap. But the way I look at it is, I was a shell of a person operating in the advertising industry, which is not unlike tech in the sense of like, it's always on, it's always growing, it's always expanding, like there's not a lot of like turning it off type energy, and I didn't had this big dragon of self-doubt, so I couldn't say no. So in that environment, I was always like, pick me, pick me, pick. And I was good at my job and I put a lot into it, and I was rewarded for it, but it was so draining and it was always on, nonstop. And so it didn't feel courageous to leave that. It felt necessary just for my soul. I mean, I just was not a good mother, wife, sister, daughter, friend. I was a shell of a human being. I was performing because my self-esteem was derived from my job.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was easy to walk away from that. I mean, I figured as an entrepreneur, I could at least make my salary. Like, I don't make that much money, that I just felt like with project work, I could definitely cobble together, enough stuff to cover my salary. So it didn't feel that risky. It felt necessary for my mental health, honestly. And then now I have never worked less. People think that when you're an entrepreneur, it's a grind and you're going to work all the time. But when growth is not your goal, I don't work that hard. I hire really, really smart people and I empower them. And so it's just not, that narrative is not true that owning your own company, even a consulting company like mine, has to be a grind.
Absolutely. And couldn't agree more. Eventually, it's about what you want in your life. And usually money is not the target. It's a mean to an end. It's a way to live the kind of life you want, but not the goal.
Yeah, there's so many studies that show that there's a point of diminishing returns after a salary of $75,000. Once you can cover, your basic needs as an individual, anything after that, it's not as exponential in terms of creating happiness. And, but we think that it is, and we chase it, and we think, even my children at a young age, if we went to someone's house that was really big, it was always like, what is their job? Like, I have to have a job like them to have a house like that. It was like immediately became, the narrative. But, you chase that for a while, and then eventually, you realize that even with my company, it's like, well, if we had more clients, yes, it would mean more money, but then it means we have to hire more people, and that's more quality control, and that's more stress. I mean, it comes at a cost, like
Of
more
course.
cost, as opposed to saying, we don't need any more clients, let's just take a nap if we can. Like, that is a very energetic flow. Honestly, it doesn't create. We also, at my consulting company, don't do any work on retainer, because we don't want to be owned, and we don't want somebody to be able to call us at any time and need our services. So everything's on a project basis, like short term, 6 to 16 weeks. And that way we can really manage the workflow and the staff. And so it's not this always on, always available business model that is typically the case in the line of work that I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier. You mentioned about the title and how it's not defining who you are and how much you're worth. And this is something that I very much relate to, because what I notice is that usually men, more than women, really look for the titles. Not also women, but men mostly. And they feel like that's what defines them, their title. So how can a woman really increase her confidence and a sense of her self-worth, detached from who she is, what's her title, whether she was promoted or not promoted?
Yeah, that's a great question. An exercise my therapist gave to me many years ago, she said, Katherine, outside of like your career, because like a lot of my self-esteem was in my career, she said, I want you to write down your definition of success in life. Like, what is your definition of success in life, period? And I was like, oh my God, I'd never once thought about that in all of my years. Everything was about work success. And then after I did that, only after I did that, then I could write down what is my definition of success at work. And what that helped me do, my definition of success in life was so big. I want to be present, with my family and my life and not stressed out. And I want to hold my husband's hand and I want to have dinner with my grandparents. It was like, that is a successful life to me. And so then once I wrote my definition of success at work, it wasn't grow the company so that it becomes, this huge money maker. So you could see that the company that I built was based on the definition of success I wanted in life. And then, so now I don't care, to answer your question about title, I don't care what other people think of my title or my company or anything, because I am achieving success in my life as defined by me. And so a lot of people look at my career trajectory and they're like, oh, you were a senior vice president at this national advertising agency and you took a step back to start this small consulting company called the Mommy Complex, and it's said with this like condescending tone. And I just go, yep, I did, and I know that it's not their definition of success and they think I've taken a step back, but I've taken a huge step forward. Like huge, like leaps and bounds. I'll never go back. But I guess the point is, to answer your question, is it just is not going to matter to you what other people call you or, how they view your career when it's aligned with who you are.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Unfortunately, it's not easy to do. Especially, when you're surrounded by men and they constantly ask you, what's your title, what you're doing, I remember that I used to live in the US and was the director of engineering back then. And in one of the dinner parties, I was never talking about work at social events. I was never talking about who I am, what's my title. And one of the men, participant, he heard that I'm a director of engineering and said, oh, I didn't know you're so successful. So all of a sudden, he saw me in a completely different light.
Yes.
And that's a shame.
Yeah.
But how can women really raise their self-worth with all that going on, and dim those voices as much as possible?
Yeah, I think the louder you can turn up your own voice and, meaning making decisions for yourself, finding the right path, living in alignment, then those other voices will almost be muted. It's like you'll see them talking, but you're like, Like the other way I describe it is, before I went through all this work on myself, it was like a sailboat with no rudder, in the center. So when the wind would blow, I was just, oh, somebody thinks this of me. Oh, somebody thinks this of me. Even a positive thing. Somebody thinks I should do my company. I should become this executive vice president. All that. Where once I grew a rudder to the sailboat, now the winds still blow, but they don't knock me over. They don't affect my self-esteem. It's like, oh, that person thinks I'm not ambitious. And then, look for the stories of people that, took the road less traveled. Like there was a guy in the agency where I used to work. His name was Bob. And he was a writer in the creative department. And he made it very clear that he didn't want to be a creative director. He said, I just want to be a writer. I love writing. And I don't want the responsibility of a creative director and managing all these people and being responsible for their work and hounding them. And I had never seen that before. I was like, oh, you can do that. You can say, like, I'm happy with my job. I don't want, more money. And I don't want all that, bullshit management. And so it's like when you see those people, it can really inspire you to say, oh, I didn't even know that was an option.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. We always think that we have to move forward towards what society think that forward means. And it's always going up the ladder.
And in capitalist society, it's more. Everything is more, it's everything has to be bigger and more in order to be deemed, but I've started to say, like, for me, more is a 4-letter word. Like is not healthy for me. When I get in that mode of more, I'm a high achiever, and I'm insecure at the end of the day, and so it's kind of a dangerous cocktail. But I've definitely gotten it under control so that my self-doubt is not driving the bus anymore, and I'm making decisions with a level head and a clear mind, with my own intentions. And once you get to this point, it's so exhilarating because you just will never go back. Like, you'll just never outsource your self-esteem again.
Yeah, but it takes time and practice. At least for me, it's not easy to do.
No, and it is a practice, and we will all have to practice it for the rest of our life. Like, it's not I don't have this dragon anymore. Like, this self-doubt comes back when you're in new situations, when you feel vulnerable, when you're a rookie at something. It's gonna come back over and over and over again. So all the tips and tricks in my book, Slay Like a Mother, they just help you build resiliency so that when life continues to come at you, you can go back to what's right for you and your soul and what you really need.
And are you willing to share a tip or two from your book?
Yes, definitely. One thing is about making time for yourself, which we all know is hard, and we all feel selfish, for doing it. But one of the things that I do is I put myself on my calendar, but I do it in reoccurring meetings. So I'll say every Monday morning at 9:00, I'm going to go for a walk with my friend and, my neighbor, but it's every Monday morning at 9:00 for the next 6 months. It's going on there. Or, Tuesday afternoon, I'm going to go to an exercise class, or it doesn't have to be healthy. It could be drinking wine with friends. But I put it on there, and I put it on there in reoccurring meetings so that I am built into my day. I am built into my life before all the crap that has to go on my calendar with, a busy life that we all have. And so it just helps because you only have to get up the courage, one time to just go, I'm going to do this every Monday. And it kind of builds in that self-care time, replenishment time, which, is really great. And another tip to alleviate some of your self-doubt is to think about 2 or 3 things that are new in your life right now. It could be a health diagnosis, good or bad. It could be getting married, divorced, raising aging parents, have teenagers. 2 or 3 things that are new to you. And to write on a Post-it note, I expect this to be hard. And then, so I put that Post-it note, on my computer or my vanity somewhere. And it's a reminder that when something is hard, that it's hard because it's supposed to be hard, because it's new. It's not hard because I suck at it. And we can forget that when we're finding ourselves in new situations. We expect to be good at it right away. And then somehow we're pissed at ourselves when we're not great at the new job that we've never done before. And so that can be a way to just give yourself grace when you're going through new and challenging times.
Those are incredible tips. And I'll definitely put the link to your book on the show notes. And how can women reach out to you, Katherine?
I would invite anybody to go to slaylikeamother.com. There's a really powerful video on there about negative self-talk that is quite the tearjerker. And then while you're there, you can sign up for our newsletter. And every 2 weeks, we send out a newsletter to help you slay your dragon of self-doubt and keep it away, and share, podcast episodes like this and blog posts and other women who are slaying their self-doubt.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Katherine, for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. This is your host, Limor Bergman Gross, and I want to encourage you to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Limor Bergman, and let me know, what do you think about the episodes? Feel free also to comment on Apple Podcasts and tell me, what do you want me to talk about? Which guests do you want me to bring? I really appreciate that, and have a wonderful day.